Saifi and Kotapka Hair Clinic. Ponad 10 000 wykonanych zabiegów. 25 lat doświadczenia. Liderzy w transplantacji włosów.
One of the most important choices a patient can make that really has either consequences in some manner or form or pure benefit up the road is what technique do they go for. So we have FUT and we have FUE. And in the current era, hair transplant surgery is available to men in their 20s, and many are doing it. Men in their 30s as well. The technique that you pick will have huge effects down the road. And in this video, I want to talk about why I, as a guy in my 20s, have opted for strip surgery over FUE as the bulk of my work to date. Now, I've done both. I've done both FUT and FUE. I'm one of the few people out there who is on YouTube who has done both techniques, who can reflect on them, who lives with them both. So the rationale for strip surgery is that number one, its effects on the donor, and number two, its effects on the recipient can be divided up. So starting with the donor, when we look at the donor, why I opted for a strip was it preserves donor density. You excise a strip from the back of the head. You don't remove grafts individually and deplete the donor. Instead, when you excise a strip and you suture it up, the donor is essentially, its density is the same. This is very important for balance because the donor is part of your identity. You don't want to spread the balding from the front to the back, and this is a terrible idea. You want to have it in sync, an equilibrium. So when you add hair to the front, the thick hair is retained at the back, so you get a beautiful, lush, youthful and refined result. There's nothing worse than having a thick head of hair here and then a depleted donor region where someone does way too much FUE. Now, you can do a small bit of FUE, it's no problem. I've done it, it works great. But the problem is you're going to want more and more and more and more hair up the road. So eventually you're going to cross that threshold. So if you start with FUE and you continue doing thousands and thousands, you will one day cross the threshold where the donor is thinned. I wasn't going to let that happen. Too important to me, the identity of a thick donor. Now, having done 2 strips and an FUE, my donor density is very intact, I have to say. It's very thick, as it should be. The second reason why I chose strip was really when you do a strip, all you're left is with one scar. Now, if you do, for argument's sake, a strip of 1,500 grafts, you have one scar. If you do FUE of 1,500 grafts, you have 1,500 scars in the back of your head. The individual comes back 3 years later, i.e. me. You do, let's say, another 1,500 grafts via the strip technique. You can excise the original scar and have one scar. If the individual chooses FUE, they have to do another 1,500 grafts extracted, which is 1,500 more scars. Collectively, we now have 3,000 scars versus one scar. That one scar at any time up the road can be transplanted. It can be grafted with some hair from the beard. You don't even need to take any from the donor. It's an option to fill it in. But you cannot graft 3,000 punctate scars. What do you do? This is a choice at the end of the day. The other principal reason of choosing strip is its effect on the recipient. Where a strip is excised from, this is a twofold answer, takes the best hair from the back of the head in terms of its resistance to the balding process. Just look around you at guys in their 60s, 70s. You're going to notice it. If they had done oodles of FUE, not all them grafts would be there today in the front because through miniaturization, a lot of them would be gone. If they had done strip, most of those grafts would be retained. So by doing FUT, the longevity of the transplant is simply better. As well, and this is just the beauty of the surgery, the grafts that are excised via the strip, that region, contain the thickest hairs in the entire donor area. So you get maximum density in the recipient. Now you might say, well, so does that mean if we put thick hairs in the hairline, it's going to look unnatural? No, because there's still fine single hairs scattered throughout the donor that the surgeon selects and puts these singles in the hairline. So it looks very natural. But if you want a dense and strong hairline, which I wanted because it has to be in sync with everything else, strip was the way to go, because it gives that thicker result. So straight away, just to list it out, we have donor preservation in terms of donor density, in terms of your identity. We have recipient longevity and recipient density. These, folks, are the reasons why I opted to do my surgeries as bulk strip. So while I have discussed why FUT, in my case, I opted for it, and I've discussed it very, very positively, and I mean every word of it, there is, with everything, a trade-off. And hair restoration surgery is a trade-off. Every time you do it, you trade something off. So with FUT, it is only fair to discuss what that is. The only downside of FUT, and it is, I firmly believe, only one, is as you do a strip, you change the gradation of the hair flow, the directionality in terms of the scalp as the hair cascades down it becomes altered. And this distortion in the donor, where the incision is made and then the scar tissue forms and the scalp meets once again, that distortion becomes greater and greater with each passing strip. So we have done some footage of this and to show you what it's like. But what it looks like is sometimes you don't even see the scar when it's at like a grade 2 or a grade 3 haircut, but something will detect your eye, because as people, our eyes are drawn to patterns. So when you have the back of the head and you have this change in hair flow, it looks like a rim of hair is different. It looks like you were wearing a hat before almost. It's funny. And no matter how you cut it, that's always going to be there at a lower grade haircut. So what I find is best to do is a little scissors work. So you could cut the rest of your hair to a grade 2 or even lower if you want, because everything above and below the scar is virginal scalp. If you haven't done FUE, it's fine. And then you do a little bit of scissors work over the scar and it blends quite well. This is the best way to mask this caveat, but it is important to understand that the more you do, this is the trade-off, but it's very well worth it and it's very minor.